You are listening to Reinvented. I am your host, Jen Eckhart. If I had to guess, a lot of people listening to this podcast have some form of social media in their lives, whether it be Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. All right, maybe my listeners aren't on TikTok. But anyway, if I also had to guess, more than half of my viewers and listeners care about how many followers they have and how many likes a single post garners on their photos. We all do it. Hey, listen, I'm guilty of it too. I get it. But here's the thing. My next guest is redefining what it means to be an influencer. And here's the good news. It has nothing to do with how many followers you have or how many likes your news of your new job promotion got on LinkedIn or that selfie you took on vacation. Patrick Kilner is a speaker, a businessman, an investor, and author of the #1 new release on Amazon called Find Your Six. And I am so excited to have him on. Pat, welcome to Reinvented.
Jen, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pat, you spent over 2 decades as a real estate agent and entrepreneur, but you were unsettled. So you studied philosophies and searched for answers to take your business to new heights, which led you to authoring Find Your Six. Your book unveils the path less traveled by the most successful agents and business owners and innovators, you name it. It's a path that leads to long-term growth of their brands, deeper personal fulfillment, and businesses that are essentially disruption-proof. You're like a modern-day Robert Frost, like the road not taken. I love your approach to things. Explain to my viewers and listeners what Finding Your Six means and what inspired you to write such groundbreaking framework that has quite literally reinvented people's thinking.
So I think like a lot of folks who get into any business and you're starting out, you are handed a toolbox of here's how it's done, young guy, young gal who's getting in and starting something, right? Whether you're in real estate, whether you're an investor, whether you're in, whatever industry you're in, right? And what I found is that I was given this in particular in sales, but I think this goes for a lot of just human relationships. It was this fake it till you make it ideal. Right? So, hey, you don't know anything yet. So you're just going to have to fake being really excellent at stuff until maybe you stumble along and get there.
Yeah.
And what I realized as I sort of fumbled along and failed my way forward in just making enough money to take care of my family, what I realized is that so many of the people who had consistently followed the fake it till you make it strategies had lost their businesses when disruption came along. So I got really curious about this and started trying to understand disruption.
Yeah.
Like what is actually, as a business owner, what does disruption look like? And frankly, what does it look like on a personal level? When people have disruption, because we all have that, right? We talk about it on a business level, and disruption is usually associated with tech, and you think of, Blockbuster Video and Netflix and that sort of stuff. Those classic paradigms for disruption. But we also deal with it personally. And so this was very much a personal journey for me, as well as a professional journey for me to understand what these things were. One of the things that I discovered as I was researching things is that we didn't even use the phrase, fake it till you make it, until 1976. Like prior to that, we didn't actually use terms like fake it till you make it. We actually didn't use the word lead generation until then. So prior to that, people had deep relationships. They had amazing businesses, but we didn't actually use these paradigms.
Right.
And I had grown up in the world of lead gen, fake it till you make it, right? And we all know sort of the classic stories.
Yeah.
Wolf of Wall Street sort of, this is it's all sort of 1980s, 1990s. If you're trying to get a business off the ground, that's the paradigm that you're following.
Right.
And we can think about maybe sort of extreme examples of how disruption happens in business. How many travel agents do you know? Like we used to know tons of travel agents.
I know like zero.
Yeah. Like some people know one or two.
My Aunt Carolyn, who like travels the world, I actually have her in my phone as like Carolyn travel agent, and I just defer to her on where I should go next.
Totally. Yeah. So you have these people. The only reason that they can stay in the industry, if they still exist, is because they have something unique and valuable to offer to the industry. Not because they're faking it, but because they're excellent at what they do.
Yeah.
And I don't know a young professional who comes into business and is like, I can't wait to be a fake.
Oh, man.
Nobody says that. Everybody goes, I want to be the best version of this profession that you've ever seen. Why? Not because I want to make money, I want to do, but because that's what I want to be remembered for. That's the legacy that I want to identify with. Yeah. Somehow we know that that's the path to deep fulfillment.
Yeah. You know, when I hear the phrase fake it till you make it, it reminds me of that funny Seinfeld episode where George Costanza's like, Jerry, remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. And but you know, I think what you're saying, so many people out there listening to this podcast right now can relate. Fake it till you make it is a big deal in the financial services industry and also in the 100%. Broadcasting industry. Hey, where I come from, I myself have worked on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange for many years in TV news. And Pat, I have to say, just bearing witness to stock traders and successful CEOs and hedge fund guys, it does become a little bit of a pissing contest among men, does it not? I mean, so many people try to keep up with the Joneses and get caught up in like an affluent lifestyle while losing sight of like their core values. Like people feel like they have to exude a certain image to be successful, which ironically could hinder their progress. How do you advise people, especially young folks, to avoid that? Like, what is the most effective way for someone to progress in their career without falling off track?
It's really about who you hang out with, right? You become the people that you surround yourself with. And at the most simplistic of levels, it's really, you're looking for a who. You're not looking for a what. You're not looking for a tech solution. You're not looking for a new hack. Right. You're looking for the fastest way. The fastest way to go from point A to point B is usually a who. It's a guide. And we know this sort of inherently. This is what great stories are built on too, right? Like Luke Skywalker finds a guide who helps him become the person he wants to be. Like we think that this is really important to teach even our younger kids. But what we forget is on the professional level, our job is to go be in the talent game. Like you're actually in the talent game. You are looking for the right people to surround yourself with to take you to the next level, period. Hard stop. And you're not looking for loose sort of affiliations. You're also not looking for just listening to them, because we can do that, right? That doesn't mean you have a relationship there. You're looking for a dialogue, which is deeply human, which I think is deeply therapeutic. Like we want a give and take.
Oh, it's why I started this podcast.
Which is awesome. I love it. I love being on podcasts. And so to be part of that is to get a part of someone's soul when you're in that type of dialogue. Yeah. Now, how many people do you need in order to go build that cohort, if you will, or that board of advisors? You're trying to reinvent yourself in a career, or start out in you're reinventing yourself from student to professional. Right. It's a huge reinvention. Right. What do you need? You need a new set of friends. How do you find them? That's why I wrote the book. But what was amazing to me is I started doing the research. I started interviewing the most successful people that I could possibly find. I live in DC, so there's a lot of very, very successul people here. And so I had them write.
In DC, really?
Yeah, amazing. So like, can you believe it? Not all politicians,
I hope no politicians,
by the way.
But whatever.
A few sprinkled in there, some good ones still. But no, just what it was incredible to sit down with folks and talk to them about their professional journey. And these were folks, I chose to speak with people who had long, illustrious careers and had ended up at the top. I wanted to know, deconstruct what got them there.
Right.
And like a good podcast host, kind of went in and said, okay, well, tell me about that, and then dig and let's understand that more. And what I found was that every one of them identified, and these again, end of their careers, identified human beings as the root of their success, other human beings. And it wasn't thousands of human beings, it was a handful. And what I found is after about 70 of these interviews, the average number of people who were deeply influential to these very high performers over the course of their entire career were 6. It wasn't tons and tons of people.
Pause. I'm going to stop you there because I have heard, and I'm sure you have, the quote, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around.
Absolutely.
There's also like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future derivative.
Yep.
Or like, show me your social media platform and I'll tell you what kind of person you are. Like, whichever you've heard, I think the intent is the same, right? Like, audit the people around you. Make sure you're spending time with people who are in line with like your goals and your personal values. I've also heard if you're the smartest person in the room, you should leave that room. And I do love that one. Where do you fall in line with those ideologies? Like, and is there any truth to that?
Yeah. So that original quote that you mentioned is often attributed to Jim Rohn. And I loved it. And I had somebody tell me that early in my career, like you're the average of 5 people you hang out with. And I think it's right on. I mean, what about your physical life? You want to have better fitness? It's not a gym membership. It's not a what? It's not an app that's going to just motivate you. It's going to be, who are the people you're hanging out with who physically challenge you, who you can be totally vulnerable with?
Right.
What does that look like in your spiritual journey, if that's important to you? What does that look like in terms of being a great spouse?
Yeah.
Right. So you can take this paradigm and put it into everything, certainly in business. What's so isolating, people talk about business and like, man, it's so hard being at the top. I'm leading this organization and I don't know where to go because I don't have any peers in the organization. Your job is to find those people outside of the organization who can invest into your growth. And it's the same if you're just starting as a young consultant at a big company and you're trying to find great mentors there.
Right.
Find Your Six is as much a book about how to go and find great people to network with and do sales with as it is a book about finding great mentors and people to really help build your career as a result of their real influence on you.
Obviously, whatever you're doing, this method of Find Your Six is working because you're largely successful. You're an investor, the founder and CEO of Kilner and Kirk Real Estate. You run one of the few teams nationally to have a total lifetime sales of over $2 billion. That's a hefty number. Your team has done between, I think, 70 million to 100 million in volume over the last 10 years. And this is what's important, without you going to a single appointment. That when I saw that in your bio, that kind of blew my mind. I was like, how is that possible? What is your secret?
Find talent. You got to find, if you want to grow, you have to find amazing people to surround yourself with. And so both externally, I found amazing people to help me think differently as a leader, but also internally, I had to find my 6 and then keep growing from there. I had to find people who I could put my name to. Right? Because in real estate, whether you're doing commercial or land or development, or you're talking to builders, or you're talking to investors, or you're selling mom and pop's place that they've had for 40 years. No matter what you're doing in real estate, and we talked about financial services, you need to find, you will be your biggest hang up unless you get out of the way. So what I realized is I could not grow past a certain level. So really what I had, Jen, was we talk about, you've got a business. You really don't have a business until you can get hit by a bus and the business continues. And So in some ways you become dispensable to the business, and that's scary for people by growing, right? So I've got great people, and I know they could run the business if something happened to me. And that's awesome, because that gives them freedom to take care of their families and to grow in their careers even without me. And I wanted to get it to that point. And we'll talk about kind of how that happened a little later, but it was such a crucial thing to make the distinction between owning a practice, to be a practitioner, and then to own a business. And when you're dealing with people, I don't have things to sell. We're really selling a service and a consultation and a deep investment into our clients. What I do is I try to find great people, invest everything I've got into them, help them in their careers to grow, to become experts and not fake it, and then let them fly.
One thing I have to bring up, because listen, Find Your Six, it's fantastic. I think it is so important. Like, they should have a course in high school and in college teaching this, should they not? I mean, I've always believed like they should teach personal finance in college and at the high school level. They should teach how to find your six. I mean, a network of trusted influencers will always, without a doubt, be a professional's biggest asset. But my question to you, and I'm sure a lot of people also out there wondering, is, I've worked in corporate media for nearly a decade, and, I look at the Rolodex and the relationships I've built today, and I would say, like, I have my six, I would say, in various capacities, but, that takes time. Right? Does it not? Like, time is a big factor in this. And I was even just discussing it with my boyfriend. I was like, because he has a lot of clients and he now has like a trusted network of individuals, but like it didn't just happen overnight. So what is your advice to people who like want to find their six, but like how do they start? Like, how do they begin that process?
Well, and that's why I wanted to codify this. Right now, I'm in the teaching world. I mean, for my own organization, my organization's well-being depends on me being a good teacher of the next generation of people who come into that. And their fulfillment, I take very seriously. So how do you codify this? And the question I began asking is, if it took on average 6 people for these very high performers over the course of their career, and they got there relatively accidentally. They didn't have a system for it. They just intuited. These are the types of people I want to be like. These are the people I'm going to see if I can go hang out with. They were able to come out of themselves enough to ask for advice early in their career. A lot of people are afraid to ask for advice because they're afraid they're going to be seen as fakes, right? And so how to do that? And so what I did was deconstructed, okay, what are the qualities we're looking for in those people? That's sort of first step, is understand who you're looking for. Just like if you're hiring somebody internally, I've hired people out of pain. That doesn't work. The only reason you hire out of pain and you just sort of make a quick knee-jerk hire. What do you
mean? Like you felt bad for the person? So
No. Well, I mean, I guess that can happen as well. It's, gosh, this person just left. I need a new administrative person.
Okay.
And you look across the street, you're like, my neighbor needs a job. Only just go talk to them. Right? Yeah. Well, you don't have any sense of what the market for talent looks like because you're not in the talent game.
You're operating from a place of like desperation.
Total desperation. Will you please sit in this seat for me? And I'll give you a job description and I'll pay you this much. And it becomes a mercenary sort of relationship. I want people that can take that job and actually make it better than anything I could write down on a piece of paper. Right? That's what I want for my kids. I want them to take the job description that, my wife and I personify hopefully for them and do much better with it ultimately. Right. And so the first step is be in the talent game and really understand the type of talent you're looking for. The second step is, once you figure that out, and we can go back to the first in a second, but then you want to be really good at developing deep relationships with people. And we're especially bad at this now because we spend a ton of time not having belly button to belly button relational conversation.
We're all hiding behind computer screens and phones and apps.
We're just, when was the last time you talked to somebody in the grocery line?
Yeah. I saw a funny meme the other day. It was like, this guy was at Starbucks just like sitting there having coffee, not on his phone, not on his computer, like a serial killer, like a psychopath. You know, because
and
we're
yet
always
that's
hiding
what
behind
90%
screens.
of the people are doing in there.
Yep.
That's not Howard Schultz. I love his first book that he ever wrote about bringing Starbucks from Italy. He sat he was blown away by the baristas and the relationship the baristas had, and all the people talking, and just this was like, it was the home away from home, is I think how he described it, a second home.
Yeah.
Great. Now it's a second place to check your email.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's lost something.
Sort of lost. Yeah.
The coffee tastes fine, and you know, kind of like Dunkin', but you know.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if Howard Schultz is going to want to come on this podcast now. Maybe he could come back and refute
I love
that.
his story. I think it's great. Coffee's too strong for me.
I want to get back to the influencer because, like, you know, you have to understand, Pat, I come from that toxic world. Being in TV, you know, like people are defined by their social media following. I was recently talking to an agent the other day and they didn't even care to see my demo reel. They were like, well, how many followers do you have? And I was like, what? Huh? And, you know, the blue verified check mark is also considered a status symbol these days. I mean, I'm curious, is that really just a bunch of garbage? Like, how should people redefine what true influence looks like?
I think we have a world full of people looking for the fastest way to be accepted and to be loved.
I agree with that.
And social media offers
that
a
instant
quick
gratification.
Fix,
exactly.
right? So, but it's not deep. It's very shallow.
Right.
And so I don't blame people for wanting those things, but I do blame them for wanting those things over and above deep relationships. And here's the thing, you know, yes, in business, it can make you disruption proof. Disruption comes along. The only thing that technology cannot replace are your deep relationships, right? But technology is really good at faking it. Like what we're talking about, you know, computers that can act like human beings. That's what artificial intelligence is. And if you're trying to fake it better than a computer, they're getting better at faking it every single minute. And what we realize is we're just sort of a dispensable commodity. Right. And that's the problem with social media, is that you're only as good as that last like. Right.
Likes are turning us all into like vain, attention-seeking narcissists. It's like we're like robots, and it's troubling. It's troubling to me.
So but I think, so what did, I guess the root of it is, what's the advice? And I don't think it's necessarily like, hey, go cold turkey. Maybe you have to, maybe that's the right thing to do. But I think the answer is, how many hours are you spending in depth with people versus in sort of shallow relationships? I think the other thing is that there's a lot of money behind having those statuses, right? So I can monetize however many likes or followers or whatever I have, right? And I can get advertisers to pay me for that. And so it's not just an ego thing, it's also a monetary thing. So there's a lot of things that pull on this. And I get it. And, you know, writing a book, one of the hardest things about writing a book is like, well, how many, like you said, how many followers do you have? You know, like I wrote a book and I want to put it out there in the world, but that seems to be the only one question people care about. Yep. And so I'm so grateful that, you know, in spite of the fact that I don't have, you know, all of this online, that you're willing to chat with me as well. And by the way, why are we speaking? Because somebody who knows us both said you would have a great conversation. So what's really amazing is trust is transferable. Deep trust is transferable. Absolutely. Shallow trust does not transfer.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. You know, you really are redefining what true influence is in the real world of business with lessons applicable to our lives outside of work. I am curious, and I want to ask you for advice because you're like a little Buddha to me. Like but you really have such a healthy ideology with how to not, do toxic networking and how to, really find people with genuine influence who will help move the needle in your career and give you personal fulfillment. I mean, for people listening, because this is the Reinvented podcast, people who are itching to reinvent themselves either personally or professionally, and it can be at any age. That's the beauty of reinvention. You could do it at, age 20, you could do it at age 50, and you can do it at age 70. What is your advice to people who want to reinvent and they want to make a true impact and influence and spread that influence to others, but they just they feel stuck? Mm-hmm. Like, was there ever a moment where you had an awakening moment where you're like, I need to change my ways. Like, I need to reinvent myself and I need to, course correct?
Yeah. I mean, so many times. And I'd say, look, you're sort of an easy one. A softball is, I had not written a book before. This is the first book I ever read.
Wow.
I ever wrote. Thank God it's not the one.
It's a #1 bestseller. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. Now, the process of deciding to write a book while I'm running different companies and have a lot of people who depend on me in those companies and in my personal life had to be part of a reinvention. So I asked myself a few questions. One was, who do I want to become personally and professionally over the next 5 years? Okay, what skills do I need to acquire in order to become that person? What knowledge do I need to acquire? What wisdom? What mindset do I need to take on that makes me better as a business owner, as a leader, as a dad? Who do I need to become? And the answer to that there was multiple things, right? There's a lot of things we could just brainstorm that. But for me, one of the things was I want to become a better communicator. And the best communicators I know are deep thinkers. And the best thinkers I know are great writers. So I need to become a better writer. And so I started writing. Writing a book is no joke. Like I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Running a podcast is no joke. Nobody told me how hard this is.
The amount of work, I mean, to do something well, you got to put a lot of time into it.
Absolutely.
And it's usually, for me, it was about 4 times more effort and time, blood, sweat, and tears to produce a book than I would have ever expected.
Hey, I've been a national TV journalist for a decade, and honestly, I had to write this. Running a podcast is so different from what I used to do. People are like, "Oh, it's going to be like riding a bike for you," and no, I had to literally get one of those podcasting for dummies books, going through it.
Right.
But people.
Well, you do a beautiful job. So.
Well, thank you.
No one would know
I
that
think you're
it's tough.
just being nice to me. But anyway, how to win friends and influence people meets 21st century is how a lot of people have described your book, comparing it to Dale Carnegie's. I mean, sales and relationship building is a core component of almost any job out there, really, when you stop and distill it down. But sales feels kind of like a dirty word these days, right? Everyone is sick of spammy cold calls and templated cold emails and transactional networking events. And even some of the pitches that I receive in my inbox, Pat, are sometimes they're not personalized, or they'll leave my name off. They'll be like, "Dear blank, insert name here." And then they'll send me the story pitch. And I'm just delete. I mean, and what I love about your book is you're like, well, what if there is another way? What if you could focus on cultivating a network of influencers who could help you drum up more business than all of those cold calls, and annoying emails combined, and stay fulfilled while doing it?
And if instead of, I've paid for leads before online. I know what that looks like. I've done the cold calls. I've done knocked doors. I've gotten kicked out of office buildings. I've done it all. This is not, don't get me wrong. Like this didn't come out of nowhere. This was failure. And then, okay, how am I going to reinvent through that failure as well?
Oh, you're not allowed on this podcast unless you failed at something. I didn't tell you that.
Every day, don't talk to my kids. They'll tell you dad fails constantly. So, but what if you could do those things and actually build that network faster than you could otherwise do, and have that business quicker than you could otherwise do? Well, you have to have a way in which you do that. So, yeah, I mean, the question, gosh, Jen, I mean, there's so much here, but how to reinvent yourself and how to go build a network in many ways is very similar, right? So I remember going to networking events and they felt like speed dating.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right? You're like, I show up, and that's what people think. Like, oh, I'm networking, so I'm going to go to an event that other people are putting on, where I'm going to be able to meet all these people and hand out all these business cards, and then it'll be certainly somebody out of the 100 people I give a business card will like me enough to give me a shot.
Right.
And people do that, and it's like spinning wheels.
Yeah. And
here's the thing: we know when people are sort of putting on airs, when they're faking, if you will.
You can say bullshitting us. I get it.
Yeah, we don't, and nobody wants to be BS'd, right? I think millennials and Zoomers are especially good at this because they're being pitched stuff constantly, right? Like it's a generation of people who've grown up with phones in hand, and who are used to making a decision about whether they're going to trust you in about 2 seconds, if that, and then swipe, let's get past them. Right. And so authenticity is like a superpower now. And if you can bring authenticity to real conversations and real people, it's a totally unfair advantage. But you have to actually put yourself on the right playing field to do that. So like, I want to be authentic. Yeah, you can be authentic on social media. The people who have, and I think this is one of the cool things about social media, is that the people who are most authentic, I think over the long haul, develop the biggest followings. Think about the people that who have the biggest followings. They didn't pay for it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. One of the most genuine, down to earth and real people I know who is invited on this podcast anytime is Sarah Blakely, the founder and CEO of Spanx. I mean, largely successful, but I mean, man, does she keep it real? And that drives attention. It's relatable. She's not BSing people.
It's not her avatar showing up.
Right. Exactly.
So I think there is, and that's why I say, like, I don't blame folks for spending time on social media. It's a really cool party. But if that's the only party you're at, I think you end up sort of being burnt out. Like, what are people going to say at your funeral? Are they going to go, hey, man, they had the best stinking following on Twitter ever? Or are they going to say, the impact she had on her siblings was just incredible. I want to have that type of impact. That's what I think real influence is. It's what people are going to say about you at your funeral or not say about you.
That was really deep. You think of like weddings and what people say there, and a lot of them are just there for, a free meal and to dance and open bar. But what people say at your funeral, I think you're spot on. That is true influence and leaving a legacy and an impact on people's lives.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're all going to be there. Yeah. And I tell my kids, like, I want it to be a celebration. I want you to celebrate that I've given you something that nobody else could give you.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I think that's what, if you live your life with that idea on a daily basis, I think you go to bed pretty happy.
Yeah. I like that you just said celebration of life. I just was down in the Florida Keys recently, and my Aunt Marty recently passed away.
I'm sorry.
And it was pretty devastating. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. And my Uncle George and Marty, they never had kids, and they always referred to me and my brother James as sort of the kids that they never had. And I got to go down and we spread her ashes at sea. And my Uncle George was like very adamant about it being a celebration. And we were like, but are you sure? Like, should we wear black? Like, we're like obviously in mourning and we miss her. But it was such a beautiful celebration, Pat. And I mean, there really was like a little tears, but it was mostly just laughter and sharing stories of her and how much she meant to everybody that was congregated in that particular room. And it was really touching. So I'm now a fan, a full believer of celebrations of life instead of calling it a funeral. What do you think?
I love it. I think, look, we have to mourn. We miss people.
Yeah.
And that's hard, and it should be.
Yeah.
And frankly, the deeper our relationships are, the more we'll miss them. And the deeper our relationships are, the more grateful we'll be for them as well in the time we had.
Pat, I know we've talked about your book, your business success and ideology. We haven't touched so much on your personal life, and I told you at the start of this interview before we started recording that I have people from all walks of life on my show. I mean, people who have experienced heartache and loss, the death of a loved one, cancer, jail, sobriety, miscarriage, fired from a job. I'm a sexual assault survivor. I mean, the list goes on and on. I feel like I would be remiss if I don't share something that you shared with me late last night ahead of this interview. I asked you, Pat, yes, you wrote a #1 best-selling book, Find Your Six. You have all of this success, but, what is it that happened in your personal life that caused you to like pivot and reinvent yourself? And your answer was losing your son. And you shared something so beautiful and so profound. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to read it. I wanted to quote you on this.
Absolutely.
But he literally, guys, wrote to me in an email saying, my son's life and passing were the most pivotal obstacles I've had to face. We all will face loss in our lives, and how we react to those times can radically define us for better or for worse. As a result of having our son, I had to reinvent my career, shifting from someone who had a strong practice to being a business opener and talent developer. I was forced to reinvent myself as a father and as a husband who was more present. I even had to reinvent my mindset toward fitness. There's no way I would have ended up writing a book, Find Your Six, without the need to change my approach to business. I thought that was so awesome. And Pat, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss.
Thank you.
But I'm so deeply moved with how you have used that moment to not only reinvent yourself, but to help others in the midst of such unimaginable tragedy. You said how we react to loss can radically define us for better or for worse. How did you stop yourself from going down that rabbit hole for worse?
First of all, thanks for letting me talk about this, because I don't think I've ever spoken about this on a podcast. Being a father is probably the biggest challenge I've ever had, right? And I highly recommend it for all men. And I see the challenge my wife goes through as a mother. It's just amazing. What you never expect is that you're gonna lose your children before you're gone, right? You expect them to be the ones to take care of you in your old age, in an ideal circumstance. And so the reality is we only get our kids once, and you don't get to determine how long you have them. And so it gave me a really broad perspective on what it means to live life as fully as possible. So what I shared with you earlier, which is, spending time, effort, and money professionally, very purposefully, so that I could spend time, effort, and money with those who I cared about most, came from running basically a neonatal ICU out of our house as we fought for our son. So he had a condition called spinal muscular atrophy, which is not a whole lot of people know about it. It's the most common of the rare diseases for children. It was up until very recently, the leading killer of kids under the age of 3. And we had never heard about it at all. And so in many ways, he was with us for 14 months. And so it's a degenerative disease, or what they call progressive disease. And I physically could not actually leave the house for many hours because of the care that he required from both my wife and I. And so that necessitated me to go and find people that I could train and be my eyes and hands and voice to clients. And that was a huge shifting point. So I guess just by having to care for my son led me to the necessity of shifting my business in a big way. And once I shifted that business, I had the incredible blessing of having amazing people who I then trusted and who knew that I was all in on their growth, because I literally couldn't do it any other way, because my business is so fundamentally based on the trust that people have in us. So that was, just on a very basic level, that's how it happened. And then even after we lost him, I realized, wow, he's changed how I think about all of this. And also the impact that a 14-month-old who can't speak can have on me and our family and our extended friends and family. And I mean, we had people writing us from Australia who had heard about our story and who were deeply impacted. I thought, wow, if a 14-month-old can have that type of impact on somebody, I think I need to reevaluate the type of impact I want to have on the world as well.
Wow. So powerful and so true. One of the main reasons I decided to start this podcast is because it has given me a unique opportunity to do something new and exciting, combining my love of journalism and passion for storytelling. But it is stories like the ones you just shared, Pat, that it just lights a fire underneath me to keep going with this, because those are the stories that matter. And, my hope is that people who listen to your story and listen to this show walk away with a renewed belief in themselves that they too can reinvent and achieve anything, no matter the cost, no matter the circumstance, no matter who you've lost or what hardship you've faced. And I really do believe that your story and impact guiding some of the most successful business leaders in the world is reigniting sort of a movement for people to find their six and to truly influence people, not for the best, not for Instagram likes, but like really influence people. So thank you, Pat, for sharing that.
You're very welcome. Thanks for allowing me to.
And thank you for coming on the Reinvented podcast.
Jen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
To all my viewers and listeners, if you haven't picked up a copy of Patrick Kilner's #1 best-selling book on Amazon, Find Your Six, do it now. Literally go to the store, do it now, buy it on Amazon. You won't regret it. As for this podcast, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Reinvented. That's available wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Hey, we're now on iHeartRadio. You name it, it's there. I'm Jen Eckhart. That was Patrick Kilner. Thank you for listening.